Welcome everyone to this webinar where we will touch into the subject of EPBD with the headline of EPBD Unpacked. Why indoor climate and energy efficiency must be addressed together. This webinar is hosted by Swegon Air Academy, which is an objective knowledge sharing platform, as you see on the screen, where we share webinars, updates and insights, book and articles, etc., etc. So please follow us on LinkedIn, on our newsletter, etc., etc. I will come back to that in the end. The webinar EPBD Unpacked will touch into a number of areas regarding EPBD. We will talk about indoor environment, we will talk about energy efficiency, and the question if they are separable or are together as described in the new EPBD European building policies. We will try to explore the different kind of touch points like IEQ, indoor environmental quality, and we will go into the energy performance of building directive EPBD itself and try to dissecate it and see where we find bullet points and statements that are interested for us as an industry. You will hear in this presentation focusing presentations on IEQ, but you will also find some national take points as well, as we will have presenters from the Swedish Association. We will also listen into industry response and see how the industry is tackling the new EPBD recast. But anyway, I'm very proud to present our presenters today. So we have Pawel Wargocki, our professor from Technical University of Denmark regarding indoor environmental quality. We have Andreas Martinsson Björkdahl, Technology and Environmental Manager at Svensk Ventilation. We have also Norén Lundh, who is Business Development Manager within Swegon. And my name is Mikael Börjesson. I will be the moderator, and I'm working as a Director of Future Solution and Public Affairs in Swegon. We should have, as some may notice, another presenter today, Andrei Vladimir Lițiu, who is actually ill, and that is what happens when you do live shows. So all the best to Andrei, and hope you get well soon. I promise that we will come back with some of the reflection from Andrei as well as a follow-up to this webinar. We will post the films afterwards, and in that sense, we will also get Andrei's comments. We will have, in the end of this webinar as well, a Q&A session, and you can write questions in the chat, and we will bring some of them up in the studio. But I can promise everyone will be answer or comments, and that will also be posted then on our websites and in the follow-up texts. So before I let the floor to our presenters, I would like to just getting the frame around EPBD and the kind of road that we are taking on together. Showing the timeline on the screens where you have the different dates, but I would like to focus on some special dates that actually are a little bit ahead in front of us. We know that until the end of this year, the 31st of December 2025, the member states of EU is supposed to plan or showing their draft or the renovation plans, the national renovation plans. That will then come into play the 31st of December 26. So that will be a very interesting road to follow. We'll look with curiosity what actually the member state will present in a couple of weeks. The second biggest date to be considered is the end of May next year, when the EPBD as a directive will actually be into force in the member states' local legislations. There we still have to see a little bit where it will end up, if we will have 27 different interpretations of EPBD, or if there will be similarities. And I think some of our presenters will come into touch point in this kind of directive as well. That's about the timeline and where we kind of framing this. I would like to make also some foundation stones regarding in which kind of surrounding we will talk around regarding the building industry, or the building, the total amount of buildings actually we're talking about in EU. As you see on the screen, and as probably many of you know, roughly 40% of the energy we are using in the EU is consumed by buildings. We have a deep renovation rate today in EU that is roughly 1%. The goal is 2 to 3%. I think probably it will be 3 and maybe even more now, since we need to catch up what we haven't done so far. Out of all these buildings that we have 200 million individual buildings in EU as a whole. And 85% of those are built before year 2000. 75% of the building stock fail to meet the energy targets that we will have in the EPBD. Another interesting statement is that we are importing gas into EU to use in our building, and over 50% of the imported gas is used for heating in buildings. So the challenge is huge. Some recent figures I noted is that 25% of the buildings we have in EU actually doesn't meet the indoor climate requirements. And even worse maybe is that 10% can't even cope with the heating demands locally in the buildings. So the need for energy performance building directive and the new recast is huge. And that, I think that's why it's important for us as an industry and as our academy to actually talk within this kind of frame. And with that said, I would like to stop talking and try to invite the first of our speakers. So, Mr. Pawel Wargocki, could you? I will invite you to take the stage.
Okay, thank you very much, Mikael.
Yeah, we'll leave the scene for you.
Okay, thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I've been introduced, Pawel Wargocki. I'll be speaking about the role of the EPBD in changing the environment regarding indoor environmental quality. But before doing so, I would like to thank the Swegon and Swegon Academy in particular for inviting me here and express my opinion about this. I think Swegon Academy has been with us for the last 20 years. I used to be a speaker of the Swegon Academy, and it actually has an important role of providing information to the audience about the important things. And I think EPBD is an important, I call it the game changer. The recast of EPBD has completely changed the environment and the discussion around indoor environmental quality. And I will explain in a second why. First of all, EPBD recast defines indoor environmental quality. And by defining it, is creating the scope of what we understand by indoor environmental quality. And let me recite from the definition is that indoor environmental quality means the result of an assessment of the conditions inside a building that influence the health and well-being of its occupants. So the important point is that these are the conditions that influence the health and well-being of occupants. And then it defines based on which parameters, such as those relating to temperature, humidity, ventilation, rate, and presence of contaminants. So here, EPBD is very specific on some of the conditions which are mentioned on the right side of this slide, which is a thermal and indoor air quality environments. Whereas it's a little bit silent on acoustic and light, which does not mean that they do not influence or should not be considered. So IEQ is actually a combination of all the four. EPBD is specifically relating to temperature or the thermal conditions and indoor air quality. So EPBD, it's not only defining IEQ, it's actually explicitly provides provisions on IEQ in many articles. So it's actually, IEQ is interwoven in the entire EPBD. So it's actually an extremely important element of the EPBD. In Article 1, it states that improving energy performance must consider indoor environmental quality alongside outdoor climate and cost effectiveness. This is actually extremely important statement. I'll come back to this in a moment. In Article 5, it introduces the principles of optimal indoor environmental quality when setting minimum energy performance requirements to avoid negative effects like inadequate ventilation. Articles 7 and 8, and these are just examples, require IEQ considerations for new buildings and major renovations. And this is actually the target. The target is for the new buildings, public, since from the next year, 2026, and then 1 year later for the renovated buildings, ensuring the conditions are addressed of IEQ. And then Article 13 mandates member states to set IEQ standards. It's also an important point and requires new non-residential zero-emission buildings to be equipped with indoor air quality monitoring and regulation devices. This is the next step. It's not only that it has to be achieved, but also has to be monitored. And then Article 19 requires energy performance certificates to include recommendation for improving IEQ. EPCs should also provide information besides energy also on IEQ. Why it's so important? Because previous documents that are related to building energy performance did not include or mention IEQ so explicitly. Actually, they didn't mention very much about IEQ, and actually many other documents and directives that were produced by EU did not mention IEQ so explicitly as the current EPBD. There has been in 2018 recast or review of EPBD, some information about the monitoring for identifying the benefits of the IEQ, but it was not that explicit as in the current EPBD. IEQ, the problem with the IEQ, it could not find a place. It couldn't find a place in the environmental directives. There has been some place in the product directives, but now IEQ actually found its right place in the EPBD. To me, EPBD recast finally brings the balance. So, and paves the ways to significant changes in buildings IEQ. And IEQ in the past was a part of this green and building or energy movement. So it was just a part. Now IEQ is on the part treated as the energy or green building. So buildings energy efficient plus high indoor environmental quality. Not the indoor environmental quality is an element of the energy efficiency. So why it is so important? And because why it is important that it is put on the same par. I give few examples that probably you are aware of that, but I'd like to give those arguments again and repeat. So during the 79 years of our life, if we leave the average life of the EU citizen, we spend 69 years in buildings. So buildings are our habitat, not outdoor air. Originally, it was an African savanna. And even if we spend 1 year more outside, we will be still 68 years in buildings. So buildings are an important element of our life, our new habitat, where we spend most of the time indoors. And so another thing is how important the air is in the buildings is that we can live 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, and 3 minutes without air. And we eat 2 kilograms of food, drink 2 liters of water every day, but breathe nearly 13,000 liters of air every day, about 12,000 liters in buildings. So buildings, and of course, regulation of food and water is at a very high level, whereas regulation of air that we breathe is on a much lower level. But buildings are important exposure pathway then, because this is where our exposure through air is happening. Then, of course, 35% of CO2 emissions, Mikael was saying, is caused by buildings. We have to remember that also healthcare is contributing significantly to the carbon footprint. It's about 4 to 5%. So if we can document that the buildings improve the health and reduce emissions that are attributed to healthcare, then there will be just a win-win situation. There are also other arguments, and you have probably seen all of them, is that poor IQ reduce performance, learning, increase absenteeism, increase presenteeism also, so people getting sick because there are sick people coming to work, and then reduce learning of children, disturbs sleep. There's a new evidence that IQ actually is disturbing sleep, which has significant consequences later on our work performance and our health. So there are other important effects that are associated if we to the conditions in the buildings if they are not maintained at the level. However, there is one caveat in the EPBD. All looks very beautiful. IEQ is addressed at the different levels, the different dimensions, has to be reported, has to be monitored, has to be maintained. But implementation of IEQ provisions in the EPBD recast is delegated to member states. EU has no legal authority to mandate them at EU level, which means every member state has to define how they are going to implement the provisions. So that may cause that there could be different parameters that are measured in relation to IQ and also at different levels and different guidelines value. So there is a need for a coordination between the member states in order to achieve the benefits of IQ and also to monitor the buildings using the same stock, measuring stock for IQ. So one of those models, how it can be done, have been proposed by REHVA, which they developed the proposal for a model IQ regulation aligning with the new provisions of the EPBD recast, basically defining what parameters should be measured at which building stage. This document is available online and you can actually read it. Also, the European Commission produced the guidance on how to implement EPBD, and then also provided information how it can be done with regards to indoor environmental quality. And they say that in order to set relevant IEQ requirements, member states should refer to certain parameters that are already existing in the EN standard or in some frameworks that define how indoor environmental quality or such as levels, or basically the rating schemes such as TAIL. I think the most important of all challenges that are ahead of us is the monitoring and documentation of IEQ. Because in order to successfully implement anything, we need to understand how the buildings are performing with response to IEQ, with regard to IEQ. So we have to have a certain benchmark, a reference on which we can build our database, on which we can monitor performance of the compliance and maintenance, and also how to simulate the energy use. And also that would provide, if we have that monitoring tool, we would be also able to provide a better estimate of economic effects. I think two important, probably one or two also very important things is that such a monitoring tool would allow us to raise the awareness among the public, because public may be not aware of the problem, and also demonstrate the invisible. So we don't know what are the risks now, and we should be aware that there are no risks, for example. So positive demonstrate. There are no agreed, unfortunately, IEQ rating schemes. There have been attempts to develop ones. There are some methods that are in the certification schemes. So these are a few that I present here. It's like IEQ Compass, that is developed as the asset rating, TAIL, which is a performance rating, is you measure it, actually the building is performing, and the level is a language, the common language for the sustainability performance of buildings that was developed by the Commission. Two of them are mentioned actually in this guidance document that I referred to by the EU. So what could be the potential metric? So today, if we talk about only IEQ, we only talk about carbon dioxide and ventilation rate, but there are many other pollutants that could be considered. They are already included in WHO air quality guidelines. The few that are really important are the one that is really important is ozone, which also not only is causing the effect, but also can be causing the chemical transformation and producing new harmful products. The other one, as was mentioned, was the tail rating scheme, which actually defines 12 parameters, and for schools 14 parameters that actually on the different components of the IEQ that should be monitored. Please note that for the indoor air quality there are several parameters, because indoor air quality is a complex issue, and this is why it has to be addressed in this way. So to summarize, the prerequisite of sustainable development is that IEQ is considered as important and as important as energy performance. So this is a prerequisite, and it has actually included in the EPBD. EPBD recast brings this into balance at last. The optimal IEQ provides numerous benefits, some of which can be monetized, and some can reduce actually carbon footprint if we can document that there is effect on healthcare. Monitoring is necessary to achieve proper automatic control, high energy performance, and optimal IQ. So monitoring is a must in order for success. And the rating schemes such as TEL can be used for that purpose. And member states should collaborate when developing ratings of IQ to ensure consistency regarding parameters and their levels similar to energy classes. So for the energy, we have a consistency, and I think the same consistency should be established also for the IQ. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pawel. Super interesting. And for those who have a hard time to follow every different statements, there will be a publication of this webinar afterwards. You can go in and look in detail, because there was a lot of good information.
You can also ask me afterwards.
So. We will do. And we will send some questions as well during our session in the Q&A. So
thank you, Mikael.
Thank you, Pawel. All my good for you. And then, Andreas,
yes,
I'm looking forward to see you in charge of the presentation.
Yes, thank you very much, Mikael. And thank you, Pawel, for introducing this, because I will also touch quite often to the base that you just introduced. And hello, everyone. Andreas Martinsson, Björkdahl. I come from an association called Svensk Ventilation. And I decided to name my presentation Smart Ventilation and Energy Efficient. Why is this important in the EPBD? And this is a Swedish perspective on possibilities and challenges that we have in this type of recast that are approaching us. But just a short introduction of what we are. We are a ventilation industry association, and we have a vision stating that we should have a healthy, energy efficient, and sustainable indoor climate for everyone. And as I always say, it's no problem doing one of these three things, but to do all three things at once, that's where we have the key challenges. And what we do is basically we do advocacy and standards, we do member engagement, we are a member association, we do education and recruitment, and we do research and collaboration, all in this to achieve our vision. So this is just a short introduction of us as an association. Now, coming back to the EPBD and what I'm supposed to talk about. This is the same Article 1 that Pawel showed. As we mentioned, it's the outdoor climate condition. And as you probably know, Sweden is considered cold climate. But we still need to have indoor environmental quality that should be cost efficient. And if you look into Sweden, we usually have a quite good sense that we have good indoor air quality in our buildings. But then you start looking at the figures and you realize this is actually wrong, especially if you look into residential buildings. And as Mikael showed earlier, it says 25% of all buildings within EU was below indoor air quality measurements. And if we look into the residential side in Sweden, we actually see that 78% of all single family houses and 50% of all multifamily houses doesn't meet the minimum 0.5 air exchange rates that is issued by the Public Health Agency in Sweden. And why is this important? And what do we do to try to correct this? And this has to do with, in Sweden, we have had a building code for many, many years that states that you have to have a certain amount of air when you do the design of the system, a certain ventilation rate. But then there was a big issue that this was not, it was designed, but it was never maintained. So if you look into the EPBD, there is a scheme for inspection. And they say mainly it's you need to do inspection every 3 or every 5 years. And this is also to do with the ventilation system. Also then related to a little bit, you can relate that to the indoor air quality if you want to. Or of course, you also need to do inspection for the energy. So in Sweden, what we did to try to overarch these problems that we see, that we do a design based on an air exchange rate, and then you see that there is still a lot of people that doesn't have healthy indoor air quality. You don't have enough air exchange rates. We actually already have had for quite many years now something called mandatory ventilation checks, or short OVK in Swedish, which is basically just the abbreviation of the mandatory ventilation check, but in Swedish. So what I actually believe here is that I strongly believe that we need to do the design, that we need to have a good indoor air quality. But as we all know, a system actually gets quite easily polluted by dust and other things from the inside. So we need to always make sure that we clean our system, we maintain our system, and we make sure that we have regular inspections of this. And not just inspections that is stated. It is stated that you need to do inspections in the EPBD, but we also need to do maintenance, whatever we find in these inspections. But then it comes down quite a big portion to the property owner, the building owner, to make sure that we actually do these types of maintenance. So when you come back to the next inspection 3 or 5 years later, you don't have the same remarks or faults that you had the first time. So you actually always take care. So you make sure that you have a high maintenance organization. And this is not something that the government is really proposing in Sweden. So this is more of the private sector that wants to make sure that their buildings are safe for the future. So coming back then, I see actually that in Sweden, this mandatory ventilation check today for multi-residential family houses, if they have an extract air system, is every 6 years. And if it's an extract and supply air system, it's every 3rd year. So with the EPBD, it says every 5 years. So there might be some changes to that, but it's not really agreed upon what will happen. And if it happens every 5 years, we will then have even closer inspection and then follow up. But what actually is happening here is that follow-up of these inspections in Sweden is today quite tedious, because it's out in each municipality to take care of all the paperwork based on these inspections. So, and in the EPBD, it actually says that you have the central register for this, and it will actually help to make sure that the inspection is followed up properly and do the maintenance. So this is something that I think is positive with the EPBD. Otherwise, we actually have quite a lot of new regulation already in place in Sweden, regardless of what's happening in the EPBD. And this is actually a bit more of a problem, because the new regulation that is being defined from 1st of July this year, there's a new building legislation taking place where you say that the building owner has to take a much deeper approach in verifying all the legislation. Before they had they could say that you have to have minimum design values, minimum airflow. Now they say you need to achieve what is called good or acceptable indoor air quality. And that's very hard to understand. What is acceptable indoor air quality for the industry? So now that basically means that we as an association, one of our biggest jobs right now is to do an industry recommendation that is trying to understand this legislative in a way that is actually making sure that we can build our buildings so it actually will be both applicable to the legislative, but also work in real life. And we actually used a lot of the document that Pawel showed earlier, like the recast guide there, and we do the standard and the EU guide. And here's the problem with the Swedish legislation, is that the Swedish legislation, they say that you should make sure that people are not unhealthy. This is not the same thing as being healthy. And if you look into the EPBD guide, it states that you should use category 2 based on the EN 16798-1 standard, the indoor air quality standard. But it also states that members may refer to category 3. And the Swedish Housing Authority that is doing the legislation here, they have said we are putting ourselves on category 3. That's the way we do it. So we always try to ramp this up a little bit. What happened? Let's see. Something happened. Okay, let's see. Works now?
Yeah, I think it works.
Yeah, perfect. So just to give you an example of how this new legislation is compromised, it says that on section 1, you need to have acceptable indoor air quality during intended use. And this word intended use is quite important, that you always have to look into how is this building being used. So that's always good. And you have to make sure that you don't have unacceptable spread of basically pollutant within the buildings. The entire legislation is only 7 sections long. I show you the 4 I think is most important for this topic here. And the only time we actually have a quantitative value in this legislation are the section 5, stating that you need to have a minimum of 0.35 liters of air per square meter floor area per second, or minimum of 4 liters per second per person living in this space. But then when you look at the recommendation, you always notice that you need to have a much higher degree of ventilation based on extract airflows. So these are mainly these are for all buildings, but the section 5 is especially for residential. But then there's another authority in Sweden called the Workplace Design or the Work Authority. And they say that you need to have 7 liters of outdoor air per second plus an additional 0.35 liters per square meter floor area. So they add, the other one was just one or the other. But they also say that this is applicable when you have low emitting building materials. Yeah. So all of this come together, and these 2 regulations work hand in hand. But they also always say that this is the bare minimum you need to have achieved. But unfortunately, we see that this has also become some sort of design value. So what we were trying to do here now, as I mentioned, the industry association now are more or less, one of our things we work on is to try to evolve a recommendation on how to work on this to actually fulfill the EPBD, but not just fulfill the EPBD, but also add in the added value that we strongly believe is important for our health. So one of this guide, this is just a quick outlook of the guide. For example, we say that you need to filter the supply air, and then we use the WHO recommendation based on Eurovent on how to define which outdoor air are you in. Are you in a polluted city or a non-polluted city or heavily polluted city? What type of room are you expected to use? And then you get some sort of table here, what type of filters you should use to make sure that the air you actually take into your building is relatively clean enough so you can actually really ventilate out all the pollutants that's inside, and you don't bring too much of a pollutant inside with you. And then if we then come back to this, what is actually happening here, if from a government perspective on a non-residential building like office or whatever, as I mentioned, it says 7 liters per second and 0.35 liters per square meters. You need to add these 2 together. But it's clearly stated that this is for sedentary work with very low emitting building materials, according to the EN 16798 standard. And these are like ceramic, stone, glasses. And if I look into a normal office, you are never in these type of very low emitting building materials. Usually you are in, at best case, low emitting building materials. So therefore, we also found in the recommendation from the EN 16987 that you should then go to 0.7 liters per square meters if you are doing sitting down work. So on the left here is the regulation, and this is our recommendation here in the middle. But also if you have materials that are not classified as low emitting, then you need to even increase your airflow even more. And these are for work when you are sitting down. If you also have work where you're moving around a lot, you need to increase the airflow per person because you have a higher degree of CO2 output. And then we also made a recommendation for residential. And as I also mentioned a little bit in the early phases here, the airflow that is stated in the regulation is not necessarily the airflow that you need to look into. You actually need to look into the airflow that the minimum extract airflows. So again, coming down to this is the regulation. This is what the Swedish legislature have interpreted the EPBD as a bare minimum value they are allowed to put in the regulation. But we instead say that you need to look into 7 liters per person or 0.42 liters, because this is category 2. But you can never go below the kitchen minimum value of 10-liter extract air and bathroom 15-liter extract air. So to summarize all of this, the regulations are always a minimum to avoid ill health in Sweden. And they try to put their regulation as an absolute bare minimum. But I strongly believe that there is a big potential in the industry to provide recommendations to keep indoor healthy. And this is not just because we want to do good things, but also if we can have healthy indoor, we can try to make this energy efficient. EPBD is just one of the regulations. We also have the taxonomy for sustainable financing. I strongly believe that inspection and the maintenance are super key values to keep this working over time. So coming back to the EPBD itself will not make a major difference in the indoor air quality legal regulations in Sweden, but there will come up some positive effects with the higher inspection schemes and central, but we also highlight the need for indoor air quality much more to the property owners. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andreas. Super interesting. And as of course, this is one member state out of 27. So
yes.
It would be interesting to follow this up as well and see where we end up. But I think it gives us some kind of flavor where we are heading.
Yes.
And now you need to save your voice because we have questions as well.
Yeah, of course.
So that's why I exchange you and invite my colleague Åsa to take the stand and continue from industry perspective as well.
Thank you, Mikael. So let's put the industry's response and mainly Swegon's take on the EPBD recast. And if we take a step back again and look at the challenges that we have on a global level, many of those things that affect the buildings and our future, such as there is a trend working on the green transition in the economy, providing support for the sustainability efforts we are making. We have a situation where we have problems with the energy supply in Europe mainly, and we have a fluctuating and very volatile market for the energy prices affecting us all on different levels. We have in the recent years survived a pandemic situation, and that has also have some implications on the HVAC design and the system design. We are also digitalizing. We have a flood of sensors coming in. We should measure all things in buildings and so on. And outside, we have some health issues as well with very poor air quality outside, but also this is affecting the inside air quality as well. And our systems and buildings also need to adapt to the future climate and addressing high humidity, skyfall, and also heat waves that are occurring. So how do you then navigate and make a future-proof HVAC system in these surroundings? If we look at the EPBD recast that is coming into place, it's aiming at decarbonization and including IQ as part of this equation. And we can also divide it in a different way, in 4 different themes that EU is trying to address. It is trying to address renovation of old building stocks that Mikael referred to earlier, decarbonization and phasing out fossil fuels and looking at the footprint and achieving zero emission buildings. We have modernization and system integration, where you should have a mandatory BACS building automatations control system for the technical building systems. And IAQ is a subject matter of the EPBD in modernization of the recast and the framework. And not the least, what Andreas also mentioned, a framework that will also enable us to achieve the targets that the EPBD is trying to achieve. So what is new then? If we look at the definition of the technical building systems, originally it's focused on heating, cooling, ventilation, hot water, light, and building augmentation. But now it has expanded and get a more wider definition in the new EPBD. And that means that it also includes on-site renewable electricity and thermal energy generation within the building, so they should be more resilient. And also energy storage like batteries and thermal storage, plus how to charge electrical vehicle, and the infrastructure is now part of the technical building systems. This means that it would be a greater focus on energy saving technologies like thermostatic valves and heat recovery system that ensures sustainability. And also this will affect how you dimension the system, how it will work in different phases of the life cycle, how you can improve the operational cost and so on. So that is something that is new and will affect us as an industry to take this into account and have more of a system approach. And what is new, and I think that is also a very healthy aspect of the EPBD, is that we go back to the basics. Why are we ventilating? It's to keep us people healthy inside the buildings. And the legal definition of IEQ is actually addressed in the EPBD, as Pawel mentioned. So it focused that we should balance energy efficiency with keeping people healthy and productive inside. And it doesn't only address the air quality, it also addresses temperature, the relative humidity, and also the contaminants that also it's affecting us occupants, even if we don't see it visually. So the IEQ is now something that must be considered really early in the building design, and also during operation, to ensure that we also keep good comfort inside the spaces. And connected to all of that in the background, which we might not think about, but it affects our business in a very heavy way, is that the funding structure around this needs to also to be supportive. So we also have funding in the background that supports sustainable renovation, how you should lift your property from a certain energy class and renovate it to achieve a better energy class. And if you receive a better energy class, of course, you can get green funding, and you can also have a classification of a building that will increase the value of your property stock as well. So this is also something that the business needs to keep track on in all local member states. What are the incentives, and maybe also help promoting sustainable solutions. What are the challenges then for with the new EPBD recast? Well, of course, this is a big impact on all these buildings that we have, and there's a huge market. So, of course, there will be existing and there will be new competitors that will increase efforts in this field, the HVAC field. And a lot of customers can also be very hesitant to start renovating, and because it could be very costly for them if they don't know exactly what they're doing. So we will have to guide them. And then the stakeholder chain can also be challenged because it can be confusing with different solutions. So it means that, we can disrupt the ordinary chain that when we renovate or when we build new buildings. And other and easier technology might be popular that maybe will not achieve the purpose of the EPBD recast. And complexity in the process of doing an energy renovation or building a zero emission building can cause confusion. So then we need to, as a business, simplify and package good solutions together. And of course, as Andreas and Pawel addressed earlier, we have member states, 27 different member states that can set local rules of the EPBD recast that we as a business needs to be on top of. And but if we look positive on the opportunities, I think as an industry, we can see that a lot of players in the field has the technology and the solutions that are in place to achieve the goals of the EPBD recast. So it's a question also to provide that information about those systems and functionalities that we have. And also the digitalization is creating quite big opportunities also for service applications and development in that sector that can help the property owners and the facility managers to operate their buildings in a good way and ensure energy efficiency and comfort. And monitoring is also enabled by the digitalization and the data collection and how to package that to provide an easy access on what measurements to take in the future and energy planning and so on is essential and will provide new opportunity in the business. And there will be a strong emphasis on renovation, of course, and we have to provide solutions that does that in a good way. And energy efficiency will, or I must say, it already has received a significant attention. But I think indoor climate must be measured and linked to this minimum standards, so we ensure that we balance energy efficiency with the indoor climate. What is very interesting in the new EPBD recast is the energy performance certifications of buildings. They will most likely become digital and accessible, and also ensure that you have advice in the EPC that will make a plan for the future, how to lift your existing building to a better class when it comes to both energy and comfort. So it will include IQ parameters, which is very interesting for quality solutions of HVAC systems. And also the inspection requirements will rise, as Andreas mentioned, and that is also a very interesting thing to tap into and also provide knowledge from our business. And last but not least, something where you can save a lot of energy on the water side, the hydronic circuits will gain an increased focus, because there is a lot of energy to save there, and also can still provide good comfort if you get those functionalities in a correct way. So to conclude a little bit, what we think is key for the industry is that ventilation competence will be key. How to the whole system knowledge from room to roof, how you can provide comfort but save energy with smart functionality. And being able to deliver IEQ or comfort inside and visualize and talk about the benefits of that is something that the HVAC industry must keep providing to our customers and explain that. And the digital offering has to bring added value, not just a lot of sensors measuring all sorts of things, but also give valid information on how to address it and use it in the future. So solutions and functions that support the EPBD recast in total. So we have to simplify and package our offer to the customer in the future.
Thank you, Åsa. Nice presented.
Thank you.
Thank you. And now I would like to invite all of the speakers on stage. And we will at least have some minutes to have some questions and answers. I have some questions myself because I've seen the presentations beforehand, of course, and I would like to, but I actually will change my mind. I will pick one of the chat questions. It's for you, Andreas.
Okay.
Because you mentioned low-emitting building materials.
Yeah.
What qualifies as a low-emitting building material?
Well, there are three categories. We have very low emitting, and non-low emitting.
So it's also easy. Then.
No, it's not so easy. And it's actually defined in the EN 16798 standard, what is qualified. I can't remember the limit value by heart, but it's defined in that standard what is considered a low emitting. And they also give examples of what is very low emitting, which is then ceramic, stone, and glass.
Okay.
So basically, a lot of other materials that we put in are low or low emitting.
Okay. Great. But then it's good. We can rely on a standard.
Yeah, you can rely on the standard.
Actually, we know we can define what is.
Yeah, exactly. It's
what has
defined
the
by
right-
the limit value of the
that's-
amount
that's,
of.
super good. Then, Pawel, you touched into this already, but what would you say regarding an EPBD recast? What would you mark as the most important change?
Well, I know that many people are complaining that maybe we should have more IEQ in it, or maybe IEQ. I think we should be very happy that IEQ is there.
Yep.
And we should, basically, this is a new opening for everything that we have been advocating for IEQ for so many years. The IEQ could not be put in any of the documents that were issued by the EU. And now it is actually in the directive. So I think this is an extremely important moment that rather than discussing whether it's good or it's bad, is basically advance on it and build upon this, what is included in EPBD.
So balancing the energy performance.
Yes, exactly.
And the climate.
It is actually treated on a par with energy.
Yep.
So it's although it's called EPBD, but actually it is EPBD / IEQ directive, I would say, because it is saying that the only energy efficient building can be considered as energy efficient if it also meets the requirements of IEQ.
Yep. Thanks. Andreas, maybe this is a wide question, but it's anyway interesting. How do you envision the EPBD shaping the future of maybe HVAC industry, but building design in general? If you I put it in a Swedish context first, but maybe you can also broaden it to a more European.
Yeah, but I would follow up on what Pawel is saying there, that all of a sudden we start to talk about IEQ in another sense, and we talk about it together with energy efficiency. And as I mentioned in my presentation, that it's easy to do one of these two things, but to do them together, that's the hard part. And just by bringing the light to it, I think there will be a certain amount of knowledge and awareness of the IEQ, which in turn put more pressure on, as a tenant, you put more pressure on your leaser, and you put more pressure on the property owner, and so on. So there will be a value chain of pressure that I think will happen to address this issue more and more, the more we start to learn about it.
That's really interesting. I will come back to that. I was trying to read the chat as well, seeing some questions coming in. But also, you touched into this, but what would you say would be the biggest challenge for the HVAC industry regarding to EPBD?
I think it is the customers afraid of having too much cost or investment in this kind of solution. So as a business or industry, we need to also address the benefits like you're talking about, and really visualize those benefits to the customer to make them invest in a quality solution that will perform both energy-wise and comfort-wise over the years.
Yep.
So if I may add, I think IEQ should be seen as an opportunity. It's a huge business opportunity. Suddenly, that is in the document that is issued by the European Commission, rather than a challenge. Because some people are talking, there is a challenge because that would be costly. But I think it's a great opportunity to build a completely new business on it.
But that also means that if there are costs involved, which will be, you will need to balance that with the benefits and be clear about that.
Yeah, maybe you have less tenant movements and so on because they are happy in the comfort that you are providing in the building, and they want to go to the office and so on. And we have a healthy and productive and learning kids in schools because they have a good temperature and good.
So there probably there are a gap there somewhere that needs to be covered.
And we knew about those benefits. So those benefits have to be undusted from the shelves and just put forward together with the whatever decisions that are made with regards to IEQ in buildings.
So a question that is not, maybe each of you can jump in, because I think this is an interesting, how can policymakers or the industry make sure that IQ is not overshadowed by the energy efficiency targets in the both in EPBD but also in the national implementations?
Oh, that's a challenging one.
Yeah.
To start with, we also have like the challenge of now with the new climate act that we need to also, at least in Sweden, I'm not sure about the EU, that we need to provide climate data for all buildings as well. So that is also, of course, a challenge, and then you need to balance that with energy efficiency and indoor quality. So, of course, it comes down to quite a lot of the tenants and occupants and whoever is the leaser, what are the requirements they are putting forward on the property owner that for them to lease the property. I don't think, for at least from a Swedish perspective, I don't think the policymakers or the legislative makers will make any difference out of this. They just want to make sure that the buildings are functional, but then it will be the market that will make sure of this.
So again, playing with the benefits.
Playing with the benefits and showing why is this important, for example, productivity increase, or it can be lots of other benefits. And then
suddenly academia will play a central role in this with all the research that is already
correct.
in this field.
I think the member states, although in the beginning there was difficult, but agreed on the energy classes in buildings. And I think that will be the same here with IQ. It's a new kid on the block that we need to deal with, and we can actually deal with it. But that requires collaboration and understanding, so that we will have classes of IQ that are similar to energy classes that everyone will follow. And I think that is very important prerequisite of the success. Otherwise, if every member state will use a different classes for IQ, suddenly it will be just pushed back.
And you could actually see that in some member states, either on official level or association level, that they start to implement indoor air quality classes as in the same way as you see energy classes with from A to D or A to G or whatever. It can change. What I've seen, there are differences, but you can see that they are trying to find an approach to move forward in this, trying to visualize what indoor air quality class do we have in this building.
And that's interesting because it leads to an answer of one of the questions in the chat, actually, when the question was, because we are quite good in kind of monetize the energy efficiency, but how can we monetize it if we're talking IEQ? And I think that is probably a key here. Which leads to one other question to Pawel. You talked about measurements, IEQ measurements. Would you say there are more prioritized measurements, or is it the total measurements in its joined together that is the real value in EPBD?
I think all together we have to consider them. We should not say, well, this measurement is more important than that one. There could be buildings that require maybe more, how to say, effort towards maybe IQ. There could be buildings that require more effort towards thermal conditions. That we cannot say that all the buildings will require the same efforts, but I think the overall aim is that buildings or occupants in buildings are healthy, comfortable, and then actually can live a life without problems. So I think this is our aim. And I think with regards to the energy and scales and labeling of the buildings, I think it's important because buildings, independently whether they are in the south or north of Europe, west or east, they will be identically affecting climate, but they will also identically affect our health. So if we want to have healthy people around the EU, so this is why those classes are so important, because we should not compromise that.
Can I just come back to your previous question there, to monetize this with indoor air quality? So if I put into perspective, it's very easy to see how we monetize energy, because that you can see on your invoice of energy invoice. But if you start looking at how much do a company pay for energy compared to how much a company pays for the salary of its employees, it's a factor 10 or 20 for 100 even for the salaries. Which means that if you could just say that we increase indoor air quality by a certain amount, that we reduce the sick leave by 10%, it can monetize directly for the company. So it's very actually easy to see these types of benefits as well. But of course, they are more abstract and take longer to measure compared to what you see on an invoice, but you can monetize it as well.
I think we've made some calculations once, and you can refer to some of the published guidebooks. The 10%, I mean, a few percent increase in productivity will pay off all the investments that are necessary in a very, very short time. So we are talking about the payback times of less than 2 years, often less than 1 year. So this is a very short scale compared to the scale that is used for the energy investments.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting angle that probably, from the industry perspective, really needs to be visual in that sense.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's a possibility when we have the energy performance certificates, if we also get the IQ parameters and classifications into that on equal level as energy classification. And then you're also, with the funding system and financial system that is actually global, driving in this direction connected to it, then it would be more interesting also for property owners and investors to invest in indoor environmental comfort as well.
Not only investors, but also if the banking system will see, and insurance companies will see the benefits that this is a sort of a business that they can. So they will be much more eager to actually give the loans for that kind of investments.
And I think that is an angle that we probably should explore even more together with the financial institutes.
Exactly,
I agree.
And maybe the HVAC industry also has to, and of course, organizations like yours need to promote IQ and the value of it together, and also that it's possible to provide system and solutions and functionality that can be energy efficient, but also provide a good comfort. It doesn't have to be the opposites of each other.
And I think that's a really good summarizing of this webinar and the discussions. I first of all would like to thank you, our presenters, and thank you all the ones who have listened into this webinar. There are several questions in the chat, and we will comment them, and we will answer them, and we will post them, so you will be able to see the response from this expertise, but also from others like Andrei that couldn't participate today. So with that said, I would urge you, if you would like to know more around indoor climate in general, HVAC industry, academia, research, etc., join us in Air Academy, sign up for our newsletter, follow us on our website, etc. And as you pointed out, Pawel, in the beginning, connect with the expertise. They are for sure willing to give more information, and know there is a lot of research to actually deep dive into as well. And join us further on. We will have more webinars coming up, but especially I would like you to join us in our 20-year celebration of the Air Academy this year, and there will be some more postings before the end is over in that time. So together, let's shape buildings that are not just energy efficient, but also healthy and comfortable for everyone. Thank you for attending this webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.